My little brother was watching cartoons when my mother's iPad lit up. My fiancé's name appeared. You need to stop acting innocent. Then another message loaded. You don't get to play uncle when you're his father. So I placed the iPad on the table and called my fiancé home. For a few seconds, I tried to convince myself I misunderstood. I stared at the screen with my hand over my mouth, sitting on the living room floor while Finn sat beside me with a bowl of crackers balanced in his lap. He was 4, still small enough that his socks never stayed on right, still young enough to call every cartoon character by the wrong name and get upset if anyone corrected him. He looked up at me and asked, "Why are you sad?" That was the moment my brain split in half. Part of me wanted to scream until my throat gave out. The other part kept noticing tiny normal things. The crumbs on Finn's shirt. The half-empty juice box on the coffee table. The cartoon music playing too loud. The afternoon light making everything look peaceful, like my entire life had not just cracked open in front of a child who didn't understand any of it. I told him, "I'm okay, buddy." My voice sounded so strange that even he didn't believe me. I had been watching Finn that Saturday because my mother, Angela, said she had picked up an extra shift. That was normal. She worked odd hours, and I had helped with Finn since he was a baby. I never resented him. I loved him. He was technically my little brother, but because of the age difference, sometimes I felt like an aunt, sometimes a second mom, sometimes just the person he ran to when he wanted fruit snacks and someone to clap at his dinosaur drawings. My mother had Finn when I was already an adult. People always reacted to that. They tried to hide it, but they never really did. A woman with a grown daughter and a toddler son always got questions. She told everyone his father was some man she had briefly dated. Someone who didn't want responsibility. Someone who disappeared before Finn was born. I believed her because she was my mother. She had always been dramatic, but I never imagined she was capable of building a lie that big and asking me to live inside it. Derek, my fiancé, had been there through all of it. That is the part that makes me sick when I replay the last few years. He helped carry boxes when my mother set up Finn's room. He built the crib while I sat on the carpet reading the instructions wrong and laughing at myself. He bought diapers when my mother was short on money. He showed up with takeout when she was too exhausted to cook. He held Finn as a newborn and said, "He's got a strong grip." Back then, it looked like kindness. My mother used to watch us from the kitchen with a soft, worried look on her face. I used to assume she was grateful. Now I know she was scared. Derek and I had been together for years. We had one ugly breakup when I was younger, the kind where nobody really wins. I told him I felt like I was waiting for him to decide if I was permanent. He said he loved me, but he wasn't ready to plan everything around a future he couldn't picture clearly yet. So we split. It lasted 3 months. I cried a lot, pretended I didn't, went out with friends, avoided places I knew he liked, and told my mother I was fine so many times that she stopped asking. When Derek came back, he came back serious. He apologized without making excuses. He said losing me had scared him because he realized he had been treating commitment like a trap when it was actually what he wanted. I believed him. For years after that, he gave me every reason to. He remembered my coffee order. He handled stressful conversations without turning cruel. He was patient with my mother, even when she got sharp after wine. He never seemed annoyed when I had to help with Finn. If anything, he encouraged it. When Finn was a baby and I worried my mother was leaning on me too much, Derek said, "He's family. We help family." I loved him more for that. When Finn started talking and called Derek buddy, everyone thought it was cute. Derek had taught him that. He would kneel down, hold out his fist, and say, "What's up, buddy?" Finn copied him, and after that, Derek became buddy. Not Uncle Derek. Not anything that sounded too close to the truth. Just buddy. I didn't question it. That is what keeps humiliating me. Not just the lie. The fact that it was sitting in front of me for years, wearing a little jacket and holding Derek's hand in parking lots, and I never once saw it. A few months before everything came out, my mother started acting strange about the wedding. At first it was small. She changed the subject when I talked about flowers. She stared too long at my ring. She said she was happy for me, but her voice always came with a delay, like she had to push the words out past something stuck in her throat. One Sunday, I brought over a folder with venue pictures. Finn was building a tower with plastic blocks on the rug, and Derek was helping him make it taller without letting it fall. My mother sat across from me at the kitchen table, flipping through photos. I pointed at one place and said, "This one has a courtyard. I think it would be pretty." She nodded, but her eyes were on Derek and Finn. I asked Mom. She blinked. Sorry. It's nice. You hate it? No, I don't hate it. You're making the face. What face? The face you make when you think something is a bad idea, but you want me to drag it out of you. She closed the folder halfway and said, "Marriage is just a big decision, Samantha." I laughed because it sounded so unlike her. This was the same woman who used to tell me Derek was the only man I dated who didn't make her want to change the locks. I said, "You've been pushing me toward him for years." Her mouth tightened. "I know," she said. 2 quiet words. Heavy enough to change the air. I told myself she was worried about being alone after I got married. Maybe she felt replaced. Mothers get weird around weddings sometimes. That explanation was easier than the truth. Another night, she came over for dinner and drank too much. Not enough to be sloppy, just enough to get honest in that vague way people do when they want to confess without actually confessing. Derek had gone downstairs to grab something from the car. I was rinsing plates. My mother stood near the counter, rubbing her thumb over the edge of her glass. She said, "Sometimes people are not who you think they are." I assumed she meant my father. He had disappointed us both enough times that he was the easiest ghost to blame. I said, "Yeah, I learned that already." She looked at me like she wanted to say more, then swallowed it. When Derek came back in, she smiled too hard. The week before I found the messages, Derek and I signed the venue papers. We stood outside afterward in the cold with my hand tucked into his coat pocket because I forgot gloves. He kissed my forehead and said, "We're really doing this." I asked, "Are you scared?" He smiled and said, "Not of marrying you." Maybe that was technically true. Maybe he wasn't scared of marrying me. Maybe he was scared of me finding out what kind of man I was marrying. That Saturday with the iPad, Finn had been dropped off around 10 in the morning. My mother was rushed and distracted. She kissed Finn's forehead, handed me his little backpack, and said he might be cranky because he woke up too early. Before she left, she looked around like she had forgotten something. I asked, "You okay?" She said, "Yeah, just tired." Then she hugged me a second too long. Hours later, Finn asked to watch cartoons. The iPad was my mother's old one, still linked to her account. I knew her passcode because she had given it to me for emergencies and cartoons. I opened the app, set it up, and sat beside Finn while checking wedding messages on my phone. Then the notification came down. Derek's name. "You need to stop acting like I did this alone." I froze so completely that Finn leaned against my arm and complained because I had stopped peeling his orange. The message preview disappeared, and I stared at the place it had been. My first explanation was wedding stress. Maybe my mother had complained to Derek about costs. Maybe they were planning a surprise. Maybe she had said something dramatic and he snapped back. Then another notification appeared. "He looks more like you every day, and I'm tired of pretending that doesn't scare me." My hands went cold. I know I shouldn't have opened it. Privacy matters. People can judge me for that part. But there are moments when your body understands danger before your mind can explain it, and mine was screaming. I unlocked the iPad. The messages went back years. Some were angry. Some were panicked. Some were short, like they had been sent during moments when one of them couldn't hold the lie anymore. My mother wrote, "I can't keep watching her plan a life with you." Derek wrote, "We agreed this was best for Finn." My mother wrote, "No, you agreed it was best for you." Derek wrote, "If she finds out, she loses all of us." My mother wrote, "You don't get to play uncle when you're his father." I stopped breathing. Not in a poetic way. I physically could not pull air in. Finn tapped my knee and asked if he could have more crackers. I put the iPad face down on the couch like it had burned me. I walked to the kitchen, poured crackers into a bowl with shaking hands, gave them to him, then locked myself in the bathroom. I sat on the edge of the tub with both hands pressed to my mouth. There was no clean way to understand it. My little brother was Derek's son. My fiancé had a child with my mother. And they had let me love both of them while they stood behind me holding the same knife. I stayed in the bathroom until Finn knocked and asked if I was hiding. That broke something in me because he sounded so small and normal and completely innocent. I opened the door, forced my face into something that wasn't terrifying, and told him I was just tired. He accepted that because children trust the adults who love them. That trust felt like a punishment. I spent the rest of the afternoon moving like a machine. I made Finn a sandwich. I wiped peanut butter off his chin. I put on another cartoon. I checked the messages again when he wasn't looking because some desperate part of me needed the horror to become less clear. It didn't. There were enough messages to build the timeline. After Derek and I broke up, my mother ran into him one night. They talked. They drank. He claimed later that they were both upset about me, which somehow made it worse, not better. He said they crossed a line one time. My mother found out she was pregnant months later and told him there was a chance the baby was his. At first, according to their messages, Derek didn't believe it. Or didn't want to. He wrote, "You said there was someone else." My mother replied, "There was, but the timing is wrong." He wrote, "This cannot be happening." She wrote, "It already happened." When Finn was born, Derek started asking questions. He said the baby looked familiar. My mother got defensive. A few months later, they did a private DNA test. Positive. That word appeared in one message, small and final. After that, their panic became planning. My mother didn't want to tell me because she said I would hate her forever. Derek didn't want to tell me because he said it would destroy me and make Finn's life a scandal before he was old enough to understand his own name. They called it protecting me. That is the part one still can't forgive. They looked at Betrayal and named it Protection because it sounded kinder. By 6 o'clock, I had a decision to make. My mother was supposed to pick Finn up at 7. Derek thought I was just babysitting. Nobody knew I knew. Every option felt wrong because the truth was too disgusting to touch. In the end, I waited until Finn fell asleep on the couch under his little blue blanket. Then I took a picture of the message where my mother said Derek was his father. I sent it to Derek. I typed one sentence. "Come home now." He called immediately. I didn't answer. He called again. I declined. Then he texted, "Samantha, what is this?" I wrote, "Come home." He replied, "Is Finn there?" That message told me everything too. Not "Are you okay?" Not "What happened?" Not "Let me explain." Is Finn there? Even then, his first fear was the child hearing the truth. Or maybe his first fear was losing access to him. Derek arrived 20 minutes later. I heard his key in the lock and my body reacted before my mind did. My stomach turned so violently I thought I might be sick. He walked in slowly, like he already knew the room was dangerous. Finn was still asleep. The cartoon had ended and the TV screen had gone dark. The only light came from the lamp beside the couch and the kitchen light behind me. The iPad was on the table. Derek looked at it, then at me. His face went white. That was my answer before he opened his mouth. I said, quietly, "Is Finn your son?" He closed his eyes. I hated that. I hated that he looked like the injured person in the room. "Sam," he said. "Do not call me that." He swallowed. I repeated, "Is Finn your son?" He looked at the couch where Finn was sleeping. His eyes filled with tears, and for one horrible second I saw every time those eyes had softened when Finn laughed. Then he nodded. It was tiny. Barely a movement. But it ended my life as I understood it. I sat down because my knees gave out. Derek stepped toward me, and I held up one hand. "If you touch me, I will lose my mind." He stopped. For a while neither of us spoke. I could hear Finn breathing softly. I could hear Derek crying under his breath. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding so loudly it felt like it was coming from outside my body. Finally I asked, "How long?" Derek wiped his face and whispered, "Since after he was born." Not officially at first. I suspected. Then we tested. You tested. Yes. You and my mother tested my little brother to see if he was your son, and then you both came back to my apartment and acted like normal people. His mouth opened, but nothing useful came out. I asked, "Were you ever going to tell me?" He looked down. That was another answer. I laughed once. It sounded wrong. Sharp and empty. "Of course you weren't." He said, "I wanted to." "Don't." I did. I swear I did. There were so many times I almost. Almost does not count. He nodded quickly. "I know. No, you don't. You got to decide every day what truth I lived in. You got to kiss me, plan a wedding with me, sit across from my mother at dinner, help me babysit your son, and somehow I was the only person in that room who didn't know the joke. It wasn't a joke. Then what was it?" He looked at Finn again. "Fear," he said. I wanted that answer to mean nothing. I wanted to reject it completely. But it landed in the room with enough weight that I had to hear it. He told me he had been terrified. After the DNA test, my mother threatened to keep Finn away from him if he told me. She said he had no legal rights, no public proof, no place in Finn's life unless she allowed it. He said staying quiet meant at least Finn would know him in some way. I said, "As Buddy." His face crumpled. I asked, "Did you teach him that so he wouldn't call you Derek in public?" He said no. I didn't think. I stared at him until he looked away. He admitted he almost told me before he proposed. He said he drove around for 2 hours with the ring in his glove compartment because he knew there was no honest way to ask me to marry him. Then he convinced himself that the past was the past, Finn was safe, and my mother would never tell me. I asked, so the plan was to marry me and keep visiting your son at family dinners forever? His silence answered first. Then he whispered, I didn't see another way. That sentence still makes me angry. People say that when they mean they didn't see a way that didn't hurt them. I said, there was another way. You could have told me the truth before I signed wedding contracts. Before I bought a dress. Before I let Finn call you buddy while you smiled like it was cute. Derek sat down on the chair across from me and put his face in his hands. He said, I love you. You don't get to use that word right now. He said it again anyway, quieter. I do love you. I made a horrible mistake. I kept making it because I was scared, but I love you. I looked at the ring on my finger. It suddenly felt heavy and fake, like costume jewelry from someone else's life. I took it off. Derek saw me do it and made this broken sound. I placed the ring on the table beside the iPad. Do you understand what you did? I asked. Not the night with my mother. That is disgusting enough. But the years after. The pretending. The proposal. The wedding. You let me stand next to my own mother and plan vows to the father of her child. He started crying harder. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel satisfied. It felt like watching someone drown after they had dragged me underwater first. Finn shifted on the couch and both of us froze. Derek wiped his face fast, like that would erase everything. Finn opened his eyes halfway and mumbled, buddy. The word hit both of us. Derek looked like he might collapse. I stood up before he could move closer. He is sleeping here tonight, I said. My mother can pick him up in the morning. You need to leave. Samantha, please. Leave. What about Finn? What about him? I snapped, then lowered my voice because Finn's eyes were still half open. You hid behind him for 4 years. Don't use him now. Derek stood there for a second, shaking. Then he left. After the door closed, I sat beside Finn until he fell fully asleep again. I didn't sleep at all. I watched his little hand curl around the blanket and wondered how adults convince themselves a child makes their lie noble. At 6 in the morning, I texted my mother. I know. She called 7 times. I didn't answer. Then she texted, please let me come over. I wrote, come alone. Do not lie to me again. She arrived with swollen eyes, wearing the same coat she always wore when she was nervous. She looked past me immediately, searching for Finn. I said, he's still sleeping. She nodded and stepped inside. For a moment, she stood in my apartment like a stranger. This woman who had raised me, held me through breakups, helped me pick a wedding dress, and lied to me with a straight face for years. I said, tell me. Her face folded. Samantha. No. Tell me. She sat at the kitchen table. I stayed standing. She told the same basic story Derek had told, only hers was wrapped in more self-pity. She said she was lonely. She said she had too much to drink. She said Derek was hurting, and she was hurting, and it happened once. I said, stop making it sound like the weather. She flinched. She said she knew it was wrong. When she found out she was pregnant, she panicked. She said another man might have been Finn's father, and when Derek became a possibility, she wanted to disappear. I asked, but you didn't disappear. You brought me to appointments. She cried into her hands. I needed you. That sentence nearly broke me. Because it was true. She did need me. She used me. She let me hold her hand through a pregnancy that came from betraying me. She let me fold baby clothes for a child connected to my life in the most twisted way possible. I said, you let me love him. Her head snapped up. He deserves love. I know he does. That is not what I meant. Her voice became desperate. He is innocent. I know he is. Then don't punish him for what we did. That was the first time she said we. Not what happened. Not the mistake. What we did. I asked, were you ever going to tell me? She looked away. I laughed because apparently that was the only sound my body knew how to make when people answered me with silence. She said, I thought if you married Derek, maybe we could keep the family together. I stared at her. The room felt like it tilted. You thought if I married the father of your child, that would keep the family together? She covered her mouth like she had just heard herself. I stepped back from the table. That was the moment I stopped seeing her as only my mother. I saw the selfishness under the panic. The way she had looked at my life and decided it could be used as glue for the mess she made. She tried to reach for me. I moved away. She whispered, I couldn't lose you. I said, you lost me when you let me plan a wedding to Finn's father. She started sobbing. I went to wake Finn. He ran to her like nothing had changed. Of course he did. She was his mother. I stood in the hallway while he hugged her legs and asked why everyone was sad. My mother looked at me over the top of his head, and for the first time, she seemed to understand that there was no apology big enough for what she had done. When she left with him, Finn waved at me and said, "Bye, Sammy." I smiled until the door closed. Then I slid down the wall and cried so hard I couldn't breathe. Calling off a wedding sounds like one decision, but it is actually 100 tiny humiliations. You call the venue. You cancel the flowers. You explain to the person altering your dress that there is no wedding date anymore. You delete the registry. You avoid messages from people asking if they should still book hotels. You return gifts from relatives who suddenly want details because concern and gossip often wear the same face. I told Ruby, the woman handling the venue, that the wedding was canceled for personal reasons. She was kind. Too kind. She said she was sorry and asked if I needed a few days before discussing refunds. I almost told her everything just because she sounded gentle. I didn't. At first, I only told Camille, my aunt. She is the one person in my family who can hear bad news without immediately turning it into her own crisis. I called her after my mother left with Finn, and I barely got the words out. Derek is Finn's father. There was silence. Then Camille said, very softly, "Are you safe?" That question made me cry harder because it was the first one that was about me. I told her I was physically safe. Derek had left. My mother knew that I knew. Camille came over that afternoon with soup I didn't eat and sat on my couch while I packed Derek's things into trash bags. Not because I wanted to be cruel. Because I couldn't look at his shirts in my closet. I couldn't see his shoes by the door. Every ordinary object had become evidence that he had been living beside me while hiding an entire child. When Derek came to pick up his things, Camille stayed. He looked terrible. Pale, unshaven, eyes red. A part of me hated that I noticed. Another part hated that I cared. He asked if we could talk. I said, "There is nothing you can say in private that you can't say in front of my aunt." That embarrassed him. Good. He said he was sorry. He said he knew sorry was not enough. Then he said he had been talking to someone about legal options for Finn, and my whole body went cold. I asked, "Legal options?" He said, "I'm his father. You hid that for 4 years." I know. Now you want to be his father because I found out? His face tightened. No. I always wanted to be his father. Then you should have been honest before a child learned to call you buddy. He had no answer. He said he wanted paternity legally recognized. He wanted visitation. He said he didn't want to take Finn from my mother, but he couldn't keep pretending anymore. The darkest part is, I didn't know if that was wrong. I hated Derek. I hated what he did to me. But Finn deserved the truth someday. He deserved support. He deserved not to be raised inside a lie that would eventually rot through the floor. That is where people started splitting into sides. When I told close family the wedding was off and why, it exploded faster than expected. My grandmother Georgia called me crying. She said what my mother did was unforgivable, but family shame should stay inside the family. I said, it stayed inside the family for 4 years. Look what that did. She didn't have an answer, but she still said I should think of Finn. Everyone kept saying that. Think of Finn. As if I had not been thinking of him every second. My cousin Chelsea said Derek was disgusting for lying, but technically Derek and I had been broken up when it happened. She said the real betrayal was the cover-up. I told her I didn't need the betrayal organized into categories. My mother sent long messages I didn't answer. She said Finn missed me. She said he asked why I didn't come over. She said I was the only sister he had, and I was hurting him by staying away. That one almost got me. I sat on my kitchen floor reading it, crying so hard my phone screen blurred. Because yes, Finn missed me. Yes, he was confused. Yes, he did not deserve to lose me because the adults in his life were cowards. But direct contact with Finn meant contact with my mother. It meant standing in her doorway while she looked at me with those pleading eyes. It meant letting her use him as a bridge back to me before I had even figured out how to breathe. Camille helped me set a boundary I could live with. If my mother wanted me to see Finn, visits could happen through Camille. Public places. Short visits. No Derek. No surprise conversations. No emotional ambushes. My mother hated it. She said I was treating Finn like a custody arrangement. I said, no, I'm treating myself like someone who matters. That was the first calm sentence I had said in weeks that actually felt true. The first time I saw Finn after everything came out, Camille brought him to a small park. I got there early and sat in my car for 15 minutes trying not to throw up. When Finn saw me, he ran like nothing in the world had changed. Sammy. I crouched down and he crashed into me. His little arms wrapped around my neck. I held him too tightly, then loosened my grip because none of this was his burden. He pulled back and asked, "Where's Buddy?" I felt Camille look at me. I said, "He's not coming today." "Is he busy?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, he's busy." Finn accepted it and ran toward the swings. Children can break your heart with how easily they return to joy when they feel safe. I pushed him on the swing for almost an hour. He told me a story about a kid at preschool who ate glue. He showed me a rock he found and said it looked like a potato. He asked if I could come sleep over again. I told him, "Not tonight." He asked, "Are you mad at me?" I had prepared for a lot of things, but not that. I knelt in the wood chips and held his small hands. "No," I said. "I am not mad at you. I could never be mad at you." "Then why are you gone?" There are questions children ask because they deserve truth, and there are truths too heavy to give them yet. I finally told him, "The grown-ups are working through something. But I love you." That part did not change. He nodded like that made sense, then asked for a snack. I went home after and cried in the shower until the water went cold. Derek kept emailing me for a while. I blocked his number, so he switched to email because apparently men who lie for years still feel entitled to a final speech. His longest message said he would spend the rest of his life proving he loved me. He said he would accept any boundary if I would just let him explain in person. He said losing me was the worst pain of his life. I read that line 3 times. Then I deleted the email. Not because it didn't hurt. Because it did. That was the problem. A cleaner story would be easier. If Derek had been cruel every day, if he had been lazy or cold or obviously selfish, I could have wrapped him in one label and thrown the whole memory away. But he had loved me in ways that felt real. He had made me tea when I was sick. He had held my hand during panic attacks. He had remembered tiny details. He had looked at me like I was precious. And he had still lied. That is the thing I keep coming back to. Love can be real and still not be safe. A person can love you and still choose themselves over your right to know your own life. My mother tried showing up at my apartment once. Camille had warned me she might. I opened the door because I was tired of being afraid of every knock. Angela stood there holding a paper bag from a bakery I liked, as if pastries could soften what she had done. She said, "Can we talk?" I said no. She started crying immediately. "I'm your mother." I know. I made a mistake. I almost laughed, but there was no energy left in me for that. "A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill," I said. "You made choices. Years of them." She said she had been scared. She said she thought she was protecting everyone. She said she knew I hated her, but she needed me to understand that she loved Finn more than anything. I said, "I believe you love him." Her face changed, like she thought that was an opening. Then I said, "I just don't believe you loved me enough to tell me the truth." That landed harder than yelling would have. She whispered, "That's not fair. Neither was letting me try on wedding dresses while you knew." She looked down at the bakery bag like she had forgotten she was holding it. I told her visits with Finn would stay through Camille for now. I told her I was not discussing Derek, the wedding, forgiveness, or family reputation. I told her if she showed up again without asking, I would not open the door. She said, "You're so cold now." That hurt because maybe I was. But cold is what happens when people keep setting fires around you and expecting you to stay soft. I closed the door. A month later, I moved into a smaller apartment. Not far enough to be dramatic, just far enough that I didn't pass the grocery store where Derek and I used to shop, or the bakery where my mother bought apology bread like that was a thing. I kept only what felt like mine. I gave away the extra dishes Derek chose. I sold the little entryway table my mother had helped me pick. The wedding dress was the hardest. It hung in a garment bag for weeks because returning it felt like admitting the last version of my life was dead. When I finally took it back, the woman at the shop asked if I was okay. I said no, but I'm trying. That was the most honest thing I had said to a stranger. There has been karma, I guess, but not the satisfying kind people want in stories. Derek's clean reputation cracked. Not publicly everywhere, but enough. People who thought he was the perfect fiancé now know he lied to the woman he planned to marry. My mother lost more sympathy than she expected. Some relatives still speak to her, but not the same way. Even Georgia, who wanted everything quiet, stopped defending her after Derek started the legal process for paternity and visitation. I think the reality finally hit her. This wasn't gossip. This was Finn's life. My mother and Derek now have to deal with each other without me acting as the cushion. That might be the closest thing to revenge I will ever get. They built the lie together, and now they have to stand in the wreckage together. As for me, I'm not healed. I go to therapy. I work. I see Finn sometimes with Camille there. I answer his questions carefully. I tell him I love him every time because I never want him to confuse distance with rejection. He is still innocent. That is the most painful truth and the one I refuse to let anger erase. But I am also innocent in a different way. Not childish. Not untouched. Just innocent of what they did. I did not create this mess. I did not ask to be put between my mother, my ex-fiancé, and a child who deserved better than all of us whispering around him. Some nights I still reach for my ring finger and feel the absence like a bruise. Some mornings I wake up angry all over again because my mind replays things I missed. Derek holding Finn too carefully. My mother getting quiet when I talked about vows. Finn calling him buddy. The three of us sitting at birthday parties while the truth sat at the table like another guest. I don't know what forgiveness looks like here. Maybe someday I will be able to sit in the same room as my mother without feeling my chest close. Maybe someday Derek will be legally part of Finn's life in a way that is honest, and I will not feel sick hearing his name. Maybe someday Finn will know the truth, and I will be strong enough to help him understand that the adults failed him, but he was never the shame. Right now, my victory is smaller. I canceled the wedding. I told the truth. I stopped protecting people who had never protected me. And I am learning that walking away can be an act of love when staying would turn you into proof that betrayal has no consequences. So I guess I'm asking this because my family is still divided and part of me is still drowning in guilt. Was I wrong for exposing the truth, canceling the wedding, and keeping my distance from my mother and ex, even if it means Finn loses the family he thought he had?